You know, there's a kind of silence that ain't the absence of sound. It's the presence of a weight. A weight so heavy it pushes the air out of the room, leaves you sitting in the quiet, just listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of a clock that seems to count down to something you can't name. It's in that silence, at 3 in the morning, when the world is asleep and the only thing awake is your own mind, that you meet the version of yourself you never wanted to know. The one who's capable of things you never thought you'd be. That's where this story lives. Right there in the space between who we think we are and what we're forced to become. My name is Frank, and for 40 years, I was an electrician. I wasn't a man of grand words or fancy titles. I was a man of connections. Wires, circuits, fuses, and breakers. The whole damn house. You learn a thing or two doing that kind of work for 4 decades. You learn that you can't rush the process. If you try to force a connection before the power is off, you'll get one hell of a shock. You learn that every single part, no matter how small, has a purpose, and if one of them fails, the whole system can burn down. And most importantly, you learn that you can't see the current. You can only see what it does. It lights a bulb, turns a motor, or, if you're not careful, it sends a man to his knees. It was the summer of 2016, a sweltering July, and the whole country was feeling the heat. I was 62, and I just retired. My back, after a lifetime of contorting myself in crawl spaces and attics, had finally given out. The company, a family-owned outfit I'd poured my soul into for 30 of those years, threw me a party. There was a sheet cake with a picture of a screwdriver on it, a plaque that said, "Thank you for your service," and a modest pension check. My wife, Ellen, had passed 3 years prior. Cancer. A nasty one that came quick and left a quiet house in its wake. So, the party was bittersweet. My son, Adam, was there. He was 32, handsome, with his mother's quick smile and an ambition that I always admired, even when I didn't understand it. He'd been a salesman in a previous life. Sold cars, sold insurance, sold advertising space in a magazine that went bankrupt. He had the gift of the gab. He could make you believe the sun was a light bulb he could sell you a dimmer switch for. He was good with people. I was good with machines. We were different that way. He pulled me aside at the party, clapped me on the shoulder with a firm hand, and said, "Dad, you did it. You made it. But for a guy who just got a new lease on life, you look like you're thinking about the price of copper." He took me to a quiet corner, away from the noise of the party and the smell of burnt coffee. He laid it all out for me. He called it his vision. A tech startup. A disruptive platform for home services. He painted a picture that was so vivid, so enticing, that for a moment, it almost felt real. "Dad, imagine it," he said, leaning in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "No more calling around for a plumber or an electrician. No more getting ripped off. This app, it's like a switchboard, but for your whole house. It connects customers with verified, vetted tradesmen. It's simple, it's fair, and it's going to be huge." He needed help. He called it a loan. A bridge to get him from where he was to where he was going. He needed $200,000. I remember looking at the floor, at the scuffed linoleum tiles that had been there since the company was founded in the 50s. I thought about the money. That wasn't just cash. That was Ellen and me. It was 30 years of skipping vacations, of driving a pickup truck with a cracked windshield for a decade, of saving every penny so we'd be comfortable. It was our retirement. The studio apartment on the beach we always talked about. The ability to just take a drive on a Tuesday morning if I felt like it. He saw my hesitation. His face fell, and for a split second, I saw a flicker of his childhood vulnerability. That look he used to give me when he was 5 and had fallen off his bike, scraped his knee, and needed me to kiss it better. "Dad," he said, his voice softer now. "I want to do something with my life. I want to make you proud. I want to build something you can look at and say, 'That's my boy.' You've always been there for me. You bailed me out when I crashed that car in high school. You paid for college when I didn't get that scholarship. You helped with the down payment on the house. You always believed in me when no one else did." He knew exactly what to say. He knew the script. Because he'd written it. I thought, what is money for if not for your children? What good is it sitting in a bank account if it can't help your son build a future? I saw it as an investment in him. He was the wire, I was the power source. And I was terrified of cutting the power. So, I wrote him the check. I told myself it wasn't a loan, it was a gift. An investment in the next generation. I watched him walk out of the community center that afternoon, the check in his pocket, looking like he was walking on air. For the first 6 months, things were buzzing with activity. He'd call me, his voice a whirlwind of excitement. The team was growing. They'd secured some office space. They were beta testing the app. He was talking to venture capitalists. He sent me a photo of a whiteboard covered in a complex diagram of lines and boxes that I didn't understand. It looked impressive. It looked official. Then, the calls started to slow down. They became shorter. More clipped. I figured he was just busy. That's what you do when you're building an empire, right? You don't have time for your old man. By the summer of 2017, the silence had become a deafening roar. I'd call, and it'd go straight to voicemail. The voicemail box was full. The last message I left was a simple, "Just checking in, son. Hope you're okay." I told myself he was just busy. I told myself it was the nature of the beast. But in that 3 a.m. silence, a different voice started to speak. A quiet voice that wasn't so sure. It started as a little hum. A low voltage vibration. Then it grew into a buzz. A sound that kept you up, wondering what was loose, what was shorting out, what was about to blow. The first crack in the facade came on an unseasonably cold day in November. My old buddy, Jerry, a man I'd known since we were kids, a guy who'd had the locker next to mine in high school, came over to my house. He'd just lost his wife, Mary, a year before. I brought a casserole over to his house, and we'd sat and talked about her. That day, he was different. His hands were shaking. He looked smaller, like a man who'd had the air let out of him. He sat down at my kitchen table, and I poured him a cup of black coffee. "Frank," he said, his voice cracking. "I need to ask you something. And I need you to tell me the truth, friend to friend." "I'm listening, Jerry," I said, a cold knot tightening in my stomach. "It's about Adam," he said, his eyes not meeting mine. He came to me about a year ago. Told me about a fantastic investment opportunity. A new app. Said he was working with you. Said it was your idea, your dream, and that he was just the front man. He said you'd vouched for him, that it was a once-in-a-lifetime chance for us old-timers to get in on the ground floor. My heart plummeted. It felt like the floor had dropped out from under me, and I was free falling in the dark. "He said you were already in for 200 grand, Jerry continued, his voice barely a whisper. "I figured, if it's good enough for Frank, it's good enough for me. And then, he said he had one more spot. A charitable one, he called it, for people who had helped you. My nest egg. Mary and me's nest egg. Everything. I gave him all of it. The equity from the house, the savings bonds, everything I had left." He looked up at me then, and his eyes were red and wet. "Frank, I haven't heard from him in months. I can't reach him. The office number is disconnected. I've been trying to call you, but I felt so stupid. I need to know. Is it real? Is the app real?" I felt a cold anger I had never known. It started in my gut and spread like a poison through my veins. It was a bitter, burning rage that he had used my own kindness as a weapon against my friends. He'd taken Jerry's money, a man who was barely holding on after losing his wife. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my living room, in the dark, just staring at the wall. I was going through my own private hell. My mind was a circuit board, and every single wire was crossed. It was a short circuit of immense proportions. I started digging. It's what we do, isn't it? When something is broken, we trace the wires. I made calls to numbers I found. I drove to the address Adam had given me for his offices. It was a UPS store. A mailbox. I sat in my truck, a cold drizzle falling on the windshield, and stared at it. It was a monument to a lie. I went home and started pulling old statements. There were some bank statements I'd managed to get forwarded by being his father and having his social security number memorized. I saw the deposits. $200,000. Then, I saw the withdrawals. Las Vegas. Online gambling sites. Car dealerships. A jewelry store. The truth was undeniable. There was no app. There was no team. There was only a man-child who had cashed in his father's life to fuel a fantasy of luxury and risk. But the worst part was yet to come. A few weeks later, I had a chance encounter with another friend, Teresa. She and her husband, Robert, were in their 80s. They lived on a fixed income, just enough to pay for their prescription medications and a little bit of food. They were good people. They'd never hurt a fly. "Frank, you're looking well," she'd said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was always too polite to complain. "How are you holding up, Teresa?" I'd asked. My voice was a fragile thing. "We're getting by," she'd said. "Robert's been a little down lately. We had to. We had to sell his old car, the one he loved so much. The one he used to take us to the drive-in inn." "Why?" What happened? She lowered her voice. We had a little setback. We made an investment that didn't quite work out. It's nobody's fault. Just a bad break. The man said it was a sure thing, but I suppose there are no sure things in this life, are there? I felt the words land like punches. Who was the man, Teresa? Oh, you know him, Frank. Your boy, Adam. He was so full of promise. Said he wanted to help out the old folks in the neighborhood. It's a shame. He said it was for a newfangled way to hire electricians, like you. I thought you'd be proud of him. It's just a shame is all. We'll be fine. The good Lord will provide. She said it with such grace, such forgiveness. She wasn't blaming anyone. She was just. That was the real turning point. That was the moment I knew what I had to do. It wasn't just about my money anymore. It was about Jerry's. It was about Teresa and Robert. It was about Martha, a widow who'd lost her son in the Gulf War, who had been so proud to be able to invest in the neighborhood kid. Jerry's words echoed in my head. I felt so stupid. They were good, honorable people who felt foolish for believing in a fellow human being. And that made me angrier than the loss of the money ever could. My son hadn't just stolen money. He'd stolen dignity. He'd stolen hope. My first instinct was to confront him. To find him, grab him by the collar, and demand to know how he could do this. But in the quiet of my empty house, looking at a framed photo of him as a boy, I realized that confrontation would be nothing more than a release valve. It would be cathartic for me. I'd yell, he'd lie, I'd threaten, he'd cry. And then what? Nothing would change. He would find another way, another scheme, because that's what men who don't face consequences do. My father always told me, you can't fix a broken wire by yelling at it. You've got to trace it back to the source and cut the power. So, I didn't confront him. Instead, I became a detective. A stealthy, quiet, old man with nothing but time and a mission. I traced his calls, his texts. I knew the passcode to his old phone. He'd never changed it from his mother's birthday. He was so arrogant, so sure he'd gotten away with it, that he didn't even think to cover his tracks. I found the bank statements. I found the text conversations where he was boasting to his friends about how dumb his dad was, how he had the suckers eating out of his hand. The words cut deep, but I didn't let them stop me. I read them all. Every single cruel, dismissive, arrogant line. I saved them all. I printed them all out. I built a file, inch by inch. I didn't confront him. I didn't call him. The silence on my end was my weapon. I waited. I let him forget about me, or at least assume I was just another sad old man who had been duped and was too ashamed to make a fuss. He was wrong. I went to the FBI. I walked into the field office in the city, a heavy file folder under my arm, and I told a young agent named Mendez everything. The first meeting was the hardest. I felt like I was betraying my own flesh and blood. But Mendez, a sharp young woman with a no-nonsense attitude, listened to me without judgment. She saw the evidence and saw a pattern. This is more than a personal matter, Mr. Harris, she told me. Your son is running a classic affinity fraud. He's preying on his own community. This is serious. If it was a choice, I could either let the system handle it, or I could be a part of making sure justice was served. I thought about my old buddy Jerry, sitting in his empty house, wondering if he'd be able to afford his medication. I thought about Teresa and Robert, selling their beloved car. I'll help, I said. My cooperation began. It meant days of going over evidence, of making meticulously detailed notes in that worn, leather-bound journal I still have. It meant phone calls to Mendez from a payphone so my number wouldn't appear on a warrant. It meant moving like a shadow in my own life. Then, the request came. Mendez leaned forward in her chair, the fluorescent lights of the office humming above us. We need a confession, Mr. Harris. We need him to say, on the record, what he did. And we need it recorded. How are we going to do that? I asked. We want you to wear a wire. We need you to invite him to dinner. A family dinner, at your house. We need you to get him talking. Brag, complain, confess. Make it about him. We'll be outside, listening. The thought of it turned my stomach. Wearing a wire to a dinner with my own son. It felt like a violation of every natural law. A betrayal of the most sacred trust. But then I thought of the wire. The copper wire. It was just a conduit for a current. The current of truth. My son had woven a tapestry of lies. My job, now, was to expose the thread. I planned the dinner for a Friday night, 2 weeks later. It was a strategic choice. The new month, a fresh round of bills for his schemes. I was hoping he'd be preoccupied with his financial chaos and more willing to talk, more willing to be careless. I called him. Just one call. No voicemail. I knew he'd be near his phone, waiting for a mark. It rang twice. Dad? His voice was surprised. What's up? For a moment, just a moment, the sound of his voice cut through the rage. I heard the little boy who used to run to me after a nightmare. But then I remembered Jerry. I remembered the UPS store. I remembered the cold knot in my stomach that wouldn't go away. Hey, son, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Listen, I've been thinking. A lot. About you. About our disagreement. I'm getting old. I don't want to carry this weight with me. Life's too short. There was a long pause on the other end. The silence was heavy. I know, Dad, he said, his voice softening. I'm sorry. I've been a real jerk. Don't apologize, I said, and the words tasted like bitter. The lie burned my throat. But I told myself it was a current of truth. The truth of justice. The truth of accountability. The Friday came. The day was gray and overcast, a fitting backdrop for what was to come. I spent the day cleaning the house. I made the meatloaf. I baked the cherry pie. I even set the table with the good china Ellen and I got for our 25th anniversary. It was a perfect recreation of the past, a stage set for a tragedy. At 6:30, a black van pulled up across the street. Mendez and a team of agents were inside. I went to the back door and gave a slight nod. I could feel the tiny microphone, no bigger than a pencil eraser, taped to the inside of my shirt. The wire ran down my back to a small transmitter in my pocket. At 7 o'clock on the dot, Adam's shiny, new, expensive sedan pulled into the driveway. He got out, smoothing down a crisp, tailored shirt. He looked like $1,000,000. He was living a lie, and he was wearing it well. I opened the door, and he hugged me. A hug that felt about as genuine as a $2 bill. Dad, he said, smiling his winning smile. You look great. It's so good to see you. I'm sorry for everything. I've been so busy, you wouldn't believe it. Come in, son. Let's eat, I said, keeping my voice level. I felt the wire shift against my skin, a cold, alien presence. We sat down at the dining room table. The meatloaf smelled perfect. The candles were flickering. For an outsider, it was the picture of a family reconciliation. How's the business coming along? I asked, taking a bite of my mashed potatoes. That app I heard so much about? He waved his hand dismissively, but I saw his eyes light up. He loved talking about this. It was his opus. It's huge, Dad. It's actually bigger than I even imagined. We're having a little trouble with some cash flow, but we're on the verge of a massive breakthrough. I just need a little more runway, you know? But the core product is solid. There's plenty of money in it? I asked, the question feeling like a stone in my throat. Tons, he said, taking a big gulp of his soda. It's going to be the next big thing. All those old folks from the neighborhood who got in early? They're going to be set for life. I'm doing them a favor. Mendez's voice was a tiny whisper in my ear, a moment of stillness in a storm of noise. Keep him talking, Frank. We need a specific amount. Get him to brag about the total. I took a sip of water. How much have you raised so far, son? He leaned back, a smug grin on his face. I pulled in over 600,000 last year. That's gross. Good, right? And it's all from people who believed in me. People like Jerry, Robert, Teresa, names I'd said at their birthday parties, at their weddings, at their children's funerals. He was bragging about stealing from them. And how much of that was from you and me? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The 200,000? He shook his head, a patronizing look on his face. That was the seed money, Dad. That's long gone. It was used for startup costs. Research. You know how it is. But it's okay. It's going to pay off big time. You were right to trust me. I got a little sidetracked. But that's over now. I'm focused. It was the confession. The arrogance, the lack of remorse, the utter, breathtaking self-centeredness of it all. He wasn't sorry. He was just sorry he'd been caught. The wire felt like a white-hot brand on my skin. I could picture the agents in the van, the recording device rolling. It was the climax of the play. And I had the lead role. I put my fork down, the clatter of metal on porcelain a loud crack in the silence. I was worried, son, I said, standing up slowly. Worried you were doing something wrong. I even contacted an old friend at the FBI. The smile on his face froze. It didn't just disappear, it congealed into a mask of horror. The color drained from his cheeks. Dad. What are you talking about? You talked to the FBI? I had to, I said, my voice now firm, tired. For all those people you used. For Jerry, who can't pay for his heart medication. For Robert and Teresa, who sold their car. For Martha, who's lonely and scared. For me. Dad, no. You can't. You're going to ruin my life. He was on his feet now, knocking over his glass of soda. It soaked into the tablecloth, a dark, spreading stain. I'm not ruining your life, son, I said, looking him dead in the eye. You already did that. I'm just trying to get you to see the mess you've made. I'll pay them back. I promise. I'll get a job. I'll do anything. He was screaming, his composure completely shattered. The charming salesman was gone. In his place was a scared, cornered animal. And if it was just the money, maybe. Maybe I could let it go, I continued, my voice full of a sorrow that choked me. But it's the way you did it, Adam. The lying, the sneaking, the way you looked at my friends, the people who helped raise you, and saw them as nothing but dollar signs. It was the way you made them feel stupid. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. He was sobbing now. Adam Harris, you are under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and interstate wire fraud, the agent said. Adam started to blubber and plead. He turned to me, his eyes pleading. Dad. Tell them. It was a mistake. Tell them. I looked at my son. The boy I'd taught to ride a bike, the boy I'd held when his mother died, the boy who had taken everything I'd ever built and used it as kindling for his own dumpster fire. I just shook my head. I can't, Adam. I can't protect you from this. All I can do is hope you learn. As they were leading him away in handcuffs, he stumbled, crying out. Why? After everything I did, why are you doing this to me? The memory of that moment is burned into my mind. It was the first time I felt the weight of what I'd done. The first time it didn't feel like justice. It felt like grief. I looked at the picture of Ellen on the mantel. I thought of the innocent little boy I'd kissed goodnight. I thought of my son, not as a criminal, but as a man lost in the dark. My heart cracked open, spilling a sorrow so deep it felt bottomless. I walked over to the table. I put my hand on the frame of his baby picture. No, I said, my voice soft, meant only for him. I'm not doing this to you. I'm doing this for you. I didn't raise you to destroy others. Jail isn't my revenge. Your conscience is. I pray you find it. After they took him away, the house was silent. The meatloaf on the plates was growing cold. The soda stain on the tablecloth was drying into a dark, sticky patch. The beautiful facade had been stripped away. The trial was a short one. He pleaded guilty to avoid a longer sentence. He was sentenced to 7 years in a federal penitentiary. For the media, he was a symbol of greed and entitlement. For me, he was just my son. A son who had lost his way. But the story didn't end with the trial. It took a turn I never expected. I'd spent my life building a nest egg, and he'd taken a chunk of it. But that wasn't what gnawed at me. It was his victims. Jerry, Teresa, Robert, Martha, and a handful of others. Good, honest people who were now in a state of panic, facing a future of uncertainty. The government had seized what they could from Adam, the car, the jewelry, a few accounts, but it was a fraction of what he had stolen. I knew what I had to do. It wasn't an obligation. It was a responsibility. For years, I'd been the man who fixed things. And now, this was a problem I had to fix. I put my house on the market. The house where Ellen and I had raised Adam. The house with the big front porch and the oak tree out back. The house we'd bought on a 30-year mortgage and had just paid off. It was the last tangible piece of our life together. The sale went through in a few months. I found a small studio apartment. It was a far cry from the home I'd known, but it was clean and cheap. It was enough. I used the money from the sale to pay back every single victim. Every cent. I wrote them checks, one by one. I drove to their houses and placed the checks in their trembling hands. Jerry cried. He hugged me, holding on so tight I thought he might break. Frank, you didn't have to do this. He was your son. He was, I said. But I'm the one who raised him. I'm the one who taught him he could always get away with it. He learned from the best. Teresa and Robert cried too. Robert, who had sold his beloved car, went out and bought himself a used pickup truck the next day. He sent me a picture of himself standing next to it, smiling. The good Lord provides, Frank, he wrote on a card. And sometimes he uses people to do it. I never saw myself as a hero. To me, it was just an admission of my own failure. I'd been so blinded by love, by the desire to see the best in my son, that I'd enabled his worst. The day after I'd finished paying everyone back, I went back to my new studio. It was empty. A single box of my things sat in the corner, a few mementos from Ellen. I made myself a cup of instant coffee and sat on the edge of the narrow bed. And then the silence hit me again. Not the silence of a quiet house, but the silence of a life I had dismantled. I had given my home, my memories, my security, to repair the damage my son had done. I had done the right thing. I knew that in my head. But my heart was a different story. I sat there until the sun started to set. The single window offered no view, only a fading orange glow reflecting off the brick wall across the alley. It was the first night in my new life. The life of a man who was now alone in a room that wasn't a home. I opened the box. I pulled out a framed photograph of Ellen on our wedding day. She was so beautiful, her eyes full of hope and love for the life we were going to build. I looked at her, and for the first time since I'd made the decision, I let myself feel the full weight of my sorrow. I let the grief for my son wash over me. Not for the criminal he had become, but for the boy who had been so full of promise. The boy I had believed in so wholeheartedly. The boy I had failed. And then, for the first time since Ellen died, I cried. I didn't cry loudly. It wasn't a wail of despair. It was a quiet, deep, gut-wrenching sob that came from a place I didn't know existed. It was the cry of a father who had lost his son. The cry of a man who was questioning every decision he'd ever made. Was it my fault? Should I have been stricter? It was in that moment of pure, unadulterated grief that I realized the true nature of the path I had taken. I had thought revenge was about delivering justice. But revenge is a fire that burns the arsonist as much as the structure it consumes. The court gave him a sentence, but the court couldn't give him a conscience. That was a battle he'd have to fight alone. A few weeks later, Adam's wife, Sarah, showed up at my apartment. I hadn't seen her since before the trial. She was different. Harder. She looked at me with a cold fury that made the tiny room feel even smaller. How could you do this to him? She spat. He was your son. He needed you. How could you let him go to prison? You could have made a deal. You could have made this all go away. I did make a deal, I said, my voice flat. The deal was that he be held accountable for what he did. There is no making it go away. You can't unbreak a window by closing your eyes. The company is ruined, she hissed. Our life is ruined. We're drowning in legal fees, and they're threatening to take our house. My house. You need to help us. You need to pay the legal fees. I saw her then. Not as a victim, but as a reflection of everything I had raised. Entitlement. The assumption that the world, and I, would always be there to clean up their mess. Sarah, I said, my voice calm, but laced with a resolve I hadn't felt before. I'm done. Done? She shrieked. Done with what? He's your son. No, I said, meeting her gaze. He was my son. The boy I knew is gone, and maybe he was never really there. I don't know who that man is who's in prison, but he's not the boy I raised. I've given him everything I had. I gave him my time, my attention, my belief, and then I gave him my retirement. And what did he do? He took it and he used it to poison the well, to hurt the very people who loved him most. He was trying to build a business. He was trying to build a lie, I said, my voice now a low growl. And I'm done being the foundation for his lies. I'm done bailing him out. You want to know what love is, Sarah? It's not a safety net that lets you do whatever you want without any fear of falling. It's not paying off your gambling debts or your lawyers. Love is letting someone fall, so they learn how to pick themselves up. Love is letting them face the consequences of their choices. I didn't put him in that cell. His choices put him there. I just refused to be the guy who handed him the key to get out. Her face contorted in anger. You're heartless. No, I said, shaking my head. I'm heartbroken. There's a difference. And my heartbreak is my own to bear. But I'm not going to let you or anyone else make it worse. I've paid back the money he stole. That debt is clean. Whatever you owe your lawyers, you owe. That's on you. She stormed out, slamming the door so hard the flimsy frame rattled. I stood there, watching the door swing shut, and I felt a surprising calm. It was the calm of a man who finally understood his own limits. I was done trying to buy someone's redemption with my own sacrifice. A few months later, I did something I'd been dreading. I sat down at the tiny table in my new apartment, a single lamp casting a pool of light on the wood. I opened my leather-bound journal, the one I'd used for the investigation, and I turned to a fresh page. I wrote a single letter. Not to Adam. Not to Sarah. But to the people he had hurt. The ones I had tried so hard to help. I wrote it by hand, one copy to each of the victims, and one for myself. It was my attempt to find my own way through the darkness. It said, "Dear friend. It's Frank. I'm sitting here in my new place, and I was thinking about you. I was thinking about how sorry I am. I was thinking about how a man's character is often revealed not in how he treats his friends, but in how he treats the ones who trusted him the most. I've spent a lot of nights lately lying awake, thinking about my son. I've thought about the day he was born, the first time he walked, the first time he rode his bike without training wheels. I thought about how much I loved him. And I think, in my own way, I love him still. But I have come to realize that the love of a parent isn't a shield. It's not a promise of protection from the world's hard knocks. It's a hand to help you stand, not a net to catch you when you jump. I've often wondered about the lesson in all of this. And it's occurred to me that what happened wasn't just a story of theft and fraud. It was a story about misplaced trust. Not just your trust in Adam, but my trust in my own judgment. I thought I knew him. I was wrong. And I'm sorry that my wrongness was the thing that hurt you so deeply. I know you've received your money back. I'm grateful I was able to do that. But I also know that what you gave to me, the most precious thing, was your belief. You believed in a future. In a young man. In the goodness of the next generation. I took that belief and I gave it to my son, and he betrayed it. And I am sorry. I'm not asking for your forgiveness. That's a gift I have no right to ask for. I'm just asking you to understand that sometimes, the best way to show someone you care isn't to protect them from the consequences of their actions. Sometimes, it's to let them face the music, so they can learn how to dance to a better tune. I've learned a lot about silence lately. There's the silence of a lie. And there's the silence of truth. I've come to believe that the truth, even when it's painful, is the only thing that can set you free. And my truth is that I love my son, but I couldn't fix him. And I'm trying to find peace in that. I will always be sorry for the pain you have endured. But I will also always be grateful to you for showing me that when you have a genuine heart, you have to share it. You tried to help my son. You saw the best in him. That is a beautiful thing. I hope you find peace, as I am still trying to find mine. I hope you can still find it in your heart to believe in the goodness of people, even when we stumble. The world needs that kind of faith. Sincerely, Frank. The final chapter of this story isn't a happy ending. Not in the traditional sense. There was no grand reunion. There were no trumpets or applause. 3 years into Adam's sentence, I got the call. He wanted to see me. The prison, a grim, gray monolith against a colorless winter sky, was a place that seemed to suck the warmth out of the world. The air was stale, tinged with the smell of industrial cleaner and old, unprocessed despair. I sat on one side of a thick glass partition. He sat on the other. He was thinner. Paler. The arrogance that had once radiated from him was gone, replaced by a weary, hollowed-out look. He was wearing a standard prison jumpsuit. The expensive shoes, the tailored shirts, the convertible car, all gone. "Dad," he said, his voice scratchy. He picked up the phone. "Adam," I said, my own voice a croak. There was a long silence. We just stared at each other. So much had been said in court, in the headlines, in the silence between us. "Thank you," he finally said, the words seeming to cost him a great deal of effort. "For paying the people back. I heard. It was the right thing to do," I said. "I needed to clean up the mess." "I know you hate me," he said, looking down at his hands. "You should. I hate me." I looked at him, and for a moment, I saw the little boy. "I don't hate you, Adam," I said, and the words, though heavy, were true. "I've never hated you. I'm disappointed in you. But I don't hate you." He looked up, his eyes red. "Why? Why would you do all that for me? Pay them back? Why did you turn me in? Why didn't you just help me?" I thought about that question for a long time. I thought about all the years of bailouts. The car, the college, the down payment, the $200,000. I was the power source that had always restored the circuit, no matter how many times it blew. "Because I failed you, son," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I always bailed you out. I showed you love by making your problems disappear. But I never showed you strength by letting you face them. I thought I was protecting you, but I was just making you weak. I was your safety net. But a safety net is only there to catch you when you're falling. It doesn't stop you from jumping. He was crying now, silent tears streaming down his face. What do I do now? I'm so scared, Dad. I'm so lost. I know you are, I said. And that's why I'm here, son. Not to rescue you. Not to give you a way out. I'm here to tell you that this is a choice. You're lost right now, you're scared, and you're facing the consequences of your choices. And you can let that destroy you, or you can let it build you. I leaned forward, pressing my hand against the cold glass. I don't know what you're going to be when you get out. But I know what you could be. You could be a man who understands the true cost of a lie. You could be a man who has nothing, and has to build himself from the ground up. That's the most honest way to live. That's how you become someone you can be proud of. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. Will you be there, Dad? When I get out? Will you be there to pick me up? I'm not going to be there with a suitcase full of money, I said, my voice firm. I'm not going to be there to get you a job or pay your rent. But I will be there. At the gate. On the day you get out. I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. If you get out and you are honest. If you get out and you've learned something. If you get out and you are a man, not a grifter. If you are honest, I will be at the gate. With nothing but a handshake. He closed his eyes, and the tears flowed freely. He seemed to crumple in on himself, the last vestiges of his bravado finally gone. He wasn't a criminal or a fraud anymore. He was just a man. A broken man who had lost his way. Thank you, Dad, he whispered. I nodded. You're welcome, son. Find that light in the darkness. It's there. It's always been there. You just have to choose to follow it. I put the phone down. I looked at him through the glass, and I felt a love so profound and a sorrow so deep it almost broke me again. But this time, it wasn't the grief of losing him. It was the hope of finding him again. As I walked out of the prison, the cold air hit my face. I stood in the parking lot, my breath forming small clouds in the winter air. The sky was a pale, watery blue, a hint of color in the gray. The story of Frank and Adam isn't about revenge. It's about the complex, tangled wires of love, trust, and accountability. It's about the deep, unhealed wounds within a family. It's a story of how sometimes, the most painful thing you can do for someone is the most loving. I often think back to that silence in my studio apartment. The silence of a man who had just lost everything he thought he had, his home, his security, his son. But in that silence, I found something else. I found the truth. The truth that you can't fix a broken wire by taping it over. You have to cut the power. You have to find the source of the short circuit. You have to feel the jolt. And then, you have to rewire the whole damn thing. It's a process of self-reflection. It's a process of owning your failures. And it's a process of letting go of the outcome. Adam might find his way. He might not. That's not my job anymore. My job is to make peace with the path I chose. I chose the path of truth. I chose the path of accountability. And as I stood there in that cold parking lot, my breath forming clouds in the frigid air, I felt a strange calm wash over me. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I was just free. Free from the weight of a lie. Free from the endless cycle of bailing him out. Free from the nagging feeling that I was complicit in his crimes. I didn't need revenge. I needed peace. And in that moment, standing alone in the cold, I finally understood that peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's the presence of clarity. I had done what I had to do. I had exposed the fraud. I had paid back the victims. I had let my son face his own judgment. And I had finally, after a lifetime of carrying the weight of his mistakes, let him go. And in the quiet, the silence wasn't heavy anymore. It wasn't the silence of a lie. It was the silence of a truth, finally told. And in that truth, there was a glimmer of hope. The story I've told you is a long one. It's full of twists and turns, of pain and eventual peace. But if there's one lesson I can leave you with, it's this: don't be afraid of the silence. Don't be afraid of the dark. Listen to it. It's in that silence that you'll find the strength to mend the broken circuits of your own life. The light is always there, somewhere. You just have to be brave enough to rewire the connection. Thank you for listening to my story. I pray you find the light in your own.